Hello, everybody. This is Jeff Halper from ICAHD with my July 2025 update, what's happening in our region. And, we've been talking the last few months, in kind of a mantra sort of a way about the process of normalization. In other words, we're all focused on Gaza. Let me begin with that. Gaza is, probably maybe together with Sudan today, humanitarian crisis and issue that we're facing, the genocide, the engineered starvation, that Israel is imposing on the Palestinians, um, the ethnic cleansing, the announcement yesterday that Israel's establishing what it calls a humanitarian city, a concentration camp in the southern part of Gaza in order to concentrate the people of Gaza in this humanitarian city in which Israel is very clear they will not be allowed to leave, which will be a transit camp towards sending the Palestinians, deporting them, forced displacement, which is a war crime, uh, forcing them to other countries under the guise, of course, of voluntary migration. This is humanitarian, it's for their own good because Gaza is inhabitable until the Riviera is built by Trump, of course. So this is really, a place where we have to focus our attention on Gaza. And and in fact, there was an interview this morning with the Israeli UN ambassador, Danny Danon, who said that they're actively looking for other countries that will take the Palestinian population. And they said there are countries that are willing to do it. Of course, the price will be high, but we have more than enough parties, including Trump, willing to pay that price. So we should be looking at Gaza, and we have to be monitoring what's happening, and we have to be just keeping track of daily of all the outrages, the atrocities happening to the Palestinians, and the practical steps being made to evacuate them, to force them, to throw them out of Gaza. But at the same time, and this has always been the other thread of our discussions, we also have to look at the big picture. We have to understand that Gaza is a phase. It's not a standalone enterprise like Israel presents it. This attack happened on October 7th, and this is all in reaction, and we're simply defending ourselves. If we look, and I'm going to put up the slide for a minute, if we look at the progress of settler colonialism, we're in the end game. That's, I guess, my message today. If you look at the progress of settler colonialism, it has a pattern. There's invasion, settlement, the foundational violence, because as we all know, genocide is built into settler colonialism. You can't take over someone else's country and displace the population and replace the population with your own, transform Palestine into the Jewish state of Israel, and take all the land without genocide. And that, of course, generates resistance. And that's the green side to the slide. The resistance also has a pattern of development. Uh, of course, what the colonists do all over the world, and this has been very effective in terms of Israel, is to criminalize the resistance. There is no resistance because the other side, so-called, are terrorists. So you criminalize it, you delegitimize the resistance, and that way neutralize it, and then that allows you to continue with your settler colonial process. The point I'm trying to make this morning is we're in the end game. This is not a process that goes on forever. It's been going on for 130 years, but it has its logic, it has its structures, it has its process, and that's where we are today. We are in the end game of the violent suppression of all resistance, a pacification process, and this is Gaza. Gaza is the quashing of the last bastion of Palestinian resistance in Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, in Gaza itself, and don't forget also in the West Bank, especially in the northern West Bank, where the refugee camps are being attacked by the same conventional military forces. Israel talks about Gazifying the West Bank. In other words, what I'm talking about here might be an analysis. I'm trying to bring this out. I'm trying to bring this into our political discussion. But it's nothing hidden. It's not a conspiracy. It's not my opinion. It's not just there. It's happening. It's what they're telling us. But we have to be listening. In other words, if we don't know the concept of normalization, we don't know the role that pacification takes as a prerequisite for normalization. That normalization is the way it all ends. It simply ends by normalizing the facts on the ground. And Israel becomes accepted by the Arab world and the international community. If we don't know this, or if we don't plug it into our discussions, even concrete discussions of what's happening today in Gaza, but have that context to it, if we're not educating the public, um, we're simply not uh, we're not understanding, and we're not able to effectively oppose the settler colonial process. And the Palestinians are at a point in their resistance today, which is very difficult for them. I won't get into all of that, of what I call summoning power. And part of summoning power is mobilizing us, all the millions of the people in the world that support the Palestinian struggle, so that and they're in a very difficult situation because Israel has captured basically the Palestinian liberation movement in the sense that the PLO has been taken over by the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority, as we know, was founded by and functions as a branch of Israeli security. It's a collaborationist regime. So the Palestinians have to both somehow form a civil society alternative to the PA, maybe a civil society PLO, and begin to develop their own political program, which has to be, as we've talked about, a one democratic state over all of historic Palestine, and then mobilize all of us. So as they're in the stage of summoning power, which is very difficult and is behind the political process, because the political process of the progress of settler colonialism with the support of the United States and the Arab world is at its end game today. So we're really in the end of times from the point of view of Zionist settler colonialism, transforming Palestine into a Jewish state, and that really is behind the urgency, I think, of my messages. And this whole idea of normalization, which is such a dry, gray academic term, is hard to mobilize people around. But this is the name of the end game. Now, uh, Netanyahu has been in Washington now for the last couple of days, and the meetings he's had with Trump have been very revealing. And one of the things that comes out is that it's Netanyahu that is going to decide, almost alone, but in consultation with his other collaborationist allies, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and some of the other Arab states, what's going to happen to the Palestinians? What, in fact, is going to be this end game? Trump was asked 3 or 4 times by different people, uh, what is your end game? Is the two-state solution still possible? Um, uh, what about the Palestinians? Is the idea of forcing people out of Gaza still? He was asked a number of questions, and in every case, he said, ask Bibi. Bibi in the very formal, in the very informal, friendly sense, ask Bibi. In other words, the United States has no policy. It doesn't care what happens to the Palestinians. It doesn't care what the final results are here. All it wants is normalization. It wants the Arab money, and Trump wants his Nobel Peace Prize, which Netanyahu gave him, as you saw yesterday, the nomination letter, which is nonsense, but never mind. But the point is that that's his end game. And you would think he would say at least, I don't really know. I don't meet Trump. I don't really have a policy. Ask Marco Rubio, who's sitting next to me. He's the American Secretary of State. He's responsible for American foreign policy. So the fact that Trump gives the answer to Netanyahu. And Netanyahu is the one that then says what he's always said and what Israel has always said. We will give the Palestinians autonomy because we've talked about this before. Israel needs a kind of a two-state solution. It can't give citizenship to the 5 million Palestinians of the occupied territories or allow the refugees to return. So there has to be an apartheid state, a little Palestinian Bantustan on little islands on maybe 15% of historic Palestine. This is what Israel has always called autonomy. And Netanyahu has always been upfront about this. He was asked once, what is your concept of a two-state solution? And he said, autonomy plus, state minus. So what Netanyahu said yesterday was, we'll give the Palestinians self-rule, but they'll never be able to threaten us. So that Israel will always keep security control over any Palestinian state. He said that outright in a cabinet meeting in Trump's office in Washington, D.C. yesterday on TV. So all of this is there. What we have to be doing, and we're not doing it well, as a movement to support the Palestinians, is to connect these dots for people, to help people understand what's happening, what the process is, and who's making the decisions. And what comes out of all of this, of course, is that the Palestinians play no role whatsoever. They're not a factor. Nobody thinks about them, and certainly nobody's consulting them. In the whole Abraham Accord process of the last few years, and now continuing towards its completion, the Palestinian Authority has never been consulted. The Palestinians are absolutely irrelevant, and it's part of our job to help insert them into the, not allow this to happen without the Palestinians being first and foremost, in our minds. So that basically where we are then is that, I think we're in this end game, and so what we have to do again, because this normalization process is happening. I mean, it's upon us. We love to be linear. I mean, I've had many Palestinian colleagues say to me, "Look, first we deal with the genocide, and then we liberate Palestine, and then we'll deal with whatever happens politically after that, 1 state, 10 states, whatever it is." In other words, almost a three-part process to the liberation process. But that's not the way it's working. In the real world, and we saw it yesterday in Trump's office, things are compressed, things overlap. We can't wait. We don't determine the agenda. We don't determine the timetable. If we don't multitask, if we're not on top of the political process, we're going to lose, and that means that when they're today, I mean, again, Trump is meeting with Netanyahu today. They're talking about two things as one. They're talking about Gaza, and they're talking about the Abraham Accords together. They're not separate. They're not separate stages. And we have to understand that the pacification of the Palestinians in Gaza is simply a precondition for immediately moving on to the final stage of settler colonialism, which is to normalize Israeli apartheid. So I guess my message of this month is we have to, I don't know. I don't even know how to put it exactly. We have to be better in our own educational processes. We're reactive. We do demonstrations. We do encampments. We have different kinds of campaigns, but they're not. We're somehow disconnected from this political process. There's a disconnect. I mean, we've always supported ICAHD, the BDS movement. It's a very important movement. It does great work. But now the BDS movement has just announced a new campaign to boycott Coca-Cola. Really? Is this really the priority today of the BDS campaign? And I can go on. I don't want to talk about, but in all of our groups, we have our own agendas, and we're not talking to each other. And we have our own priorities, and we have our own budgets, and we have our own staffs. There's no coordination at all. And there is no organization that I know of that is talking about what I'm talking about today. The big picture and where are we and what should our policies be and how should we be moving forward together with our Palestinian partners. There isn't anything like that. And uh, I'm really not sure what to do about that. What the most concrete thing to do, and we tried to mount this, is to have a concentrated campaign. I call it a campaign against normalizing Israeli apartheid. This is exactly the campaign that's called for today. And we've begun to develop it in ICAHD. We have a website that I can share with you, and it's on our website page, a campaign website. We have the materials out, but we couldn't find a partner to go into it with. We couldn't find a Palestinian partner, and we can't find any partners abroad. In other words, this campaign, and I'm not saying it because it's an ICAHD initiated campaign. It is in a way because we've always been a big picture organization. But there should be partners out there. We can't do this alone. And because we're seen as an Israeli organization, we also can't be the real initiators of it, because who's going to go into a campaign with an Israeli organization, even a called for campaign? And I think the weakness of our movement, and this is exactly the moment where it comes out most crystal clear, is we cannot articulate where we are politically. We're not connecting the dots for people, and we're not able to mount a campaign against normalizing Israeli apartheid. Today, we're not capable of doing that. And we're dealing with all kinds of, I don't know, other issues. So I think we have to take this moment and really reflect seriously, all of us. And the problem is, of course, we have no collective forum. We have no way of talking with each other even. But somehow we've got to reflect in terms of where we're going, how we coordinate, what are the campaigns of the movement of the moment, how can we better coordinate with the Palestinians? There's very little coordination between groups abroad that are working and the Palestinians that are here, and really begin urgently to draw some conclusions. And I'm throwing this out because I have no address. I can't say, look, this is a central organization. Let's all pressure them to begin, strategizing better. There isn't anything like that. So I'm throwing this out, which shows the weakness, I think, of our movement. And let's see where the seeds land. And let's see if any of you or any of the organizations begin to pick up on it. Let's just see. And what the final word that I have is that we're changing the name of ICAHD. And it's reflected in all of this. ICAHD was the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. And house demolitions is still one of the focus issues that we deal with. It's very important. But again, we put it within this, why are they demolishing houses? How does that fit into the big picture in terms of where Israel is going? And it fits in, of course, in terms of ethnic cleansing, taking the land, displacing the Palestinians, all these elements that are crucial for settler colonialism. Okay. But at the same time, ICAHD has moved towards part of the summoning power that we're trying to develop with our Palestinian colleagues is to develop our own end game. What would be the Palestinian-led just end game? In terms of instead of normalization, and the only possible way out of this is one democratic state over all of historic Palestine. Our idea was then that there wouldn't be an Israel. There is no more Israel. Zionism is gone. The settler colonial structures of domination and control are dismantled, and we begin with a new civil society that's inclusive of everyone as citizens, and the refugees return, and we begin to build a new just society and polity, one democratic state. That, in my view at least, is the only political program, and that's what we should be pushing because we do have an alternative vision and an alternative, program, but we're silent on that. So even there we're weak because we're letting Bibi and Trump and the others, they're the ones that are deciding where this is going. They're in control of the debate, of the policy discussion, and there's no pushback from our part because we're not supporting or advocating any particular political program. So the idea is that ICAHD, because there's no more Israel, there should not be more Israel, but Israeli Jews should be incorporated as equal citizens into the one democratic state. That in fact, ICAHD itself should be incorporated into a wider one democratic state movement. That hasn't happened yet because there is no effective one democratic state movement that's yet emerged. But we do feel that we want to remove the word Israeli from our name because because we don't support an Israeli anymore, and we see ourselves more as colleagues, comrades with our Palestinian colleagues in a joint anti-colonial struggle. So from now on, we're known as ICAHD. We're not reinventing a new name. We thought of the International Committee against, but that doesn't locate it here in Palestine, Israel. We're ICAHD. That I think has become a brand name. People know ICAHD. And then to describe it, we have a strap line on our website, as you'll see, that says resisting apartheid, constructing or building a shared democracy in Palestine, Israel. So that is the description of what ICAHD is. From today, we're going to be called ICAHD, and we're no longer going to refer to ourselves as the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. So that I think, in a way, shows how we're trying as an Israeli group, which we really are, uh, to um, to evolve and to be relevant and to be a part of this anti-colonial struggle together with our Palestinian partners, with the vision of one democratic state, and therefore no need to use the word Israeli anymore. So I'll leave it at that. Let's see where the seeds land and if anything begins to sprout. Until August. Bye all.